Well, hello folks, I'm L.A. Little and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets. We do it from a neoclassical perspective each time, asking ourselves just that one question. What happened today? And what does it tell us about the coming ones? Do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday, broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's under the channel L.A. Little. As far as what happened today, it was another one of those turnaround days. You go back the other way, and actually the Russell's showing red, but it wasn't. We had green across the board, up about 1% across the board. S&P 1.25, it was the leader. Everybody was jumping into everything that had been beaten up as bad as possible. Bonds were the only thing that went the other way. Everything else on the upside today. Let's take a look at the charts. If we go over there, and we'll pull up the S&P to start with. So what do? We have a reversal, so we come down. Last night we were talking about we should get some sort of a bounce here. And it wasn't the indexes telling us that, it was the sectors telling us that. And sure enough, that is what we got. We get back above this big volume bar over the top, right? Now you're going to come back into this bar. That's where the resistance is on the way back up here and there. So that's what we're going to do on the way back up on the S&P 500. Now on the NASDAQ comes back into that gap area. As it gets into the gap area, it finds support. Today it undercuts it, goes back over it, has a little bit more volume, but nothing big, right? NASDAQ's going to try to get back into this swing point highs, low, you're going to back up into this area. The real test on the NASDAQ, just like every time this has happened, is to get back over the breakdown bar. So that's where the NASDAQ is set up tonight. If we look at the NDX, it looks about the same sort of thing. You're back into the high already. This has been the stronger one, right? It has more volume as it comes up underneath, reversing, coming back up, breakdown bar, top, that's the target. Now the Russell was the test today. The Russell came down to test the lows, right? The lows were from back here about 3 months ago. We're talking about, May of, about May 6th or something. You get underneath it, you have more volume, right? You test under it, you have more volume. You do a hammer reversal, which is good in that you pop back out of there. Problem is, you do a lot more volume on the way in. That says more than likely you're going to come down here and you're going to test this again. And if you look at this a little bit longer, right, and one of the things I don't think I talked about last night, or I know I've talked about before, I don't believe I brought it up last night, and that is that you had an ABCD structure down, right? And then when this thing took the bigger bounce, you also had an ABCD structure down on the bigger bounce. Both of them got completed today on the reversal volume escalation as part of it. If you remember last night, we were talking about, the bounces that were probably going to come was in the sectors, which made us think that we would get some sort of a move back up on the S&P, on the Dow, so forth, right? This IBB was coming into this big bar. Didn't have the volume on the test here, right? Looked like it would probably try to reverse. That's exactly what it did today. It reversed, got back over the top. It's going to try to get back to the top of the breakdown bar now. So that's the IBB. If we look at the transports, right? Another beaten down sector, or one of the beaten down sectors. You had a swing point low established a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You get a push up. That push up takes you up into the retest regen bearish, right, off of this. Can't get over it. Come back down. You're going to try to test the lows. You don't quite get to them. Flip it around. You're going to come back up and test the highs. You're coming back up. You don't have much of anything. The test is going to be there. Doesn't look like it's going to have it, right? I see the volumes here as well. That looks like it's just going to go up, test again, probably stay in the lower range now. This still, on a weekly basis, wants to test the lows of October. And if you look at this, you got this range trade. The test is in this area. That's where it's at. That's where it's going to test again this week. If we look at it on that weekly basis, you can see that push got deep into here. It's actually still a close enough call to where it doesn't have to go to the bottom because it keeps fighting that area and it doesn't want to give it up. So it tests into it, right, pops out. Tests back into it, pops out, at least so far. So, I wouldn't write that off as it's a must do, but it's certainly a possible If we look at base materials, big volume today, huge volume actually. It ends up undercutting yesterday's low, has more volume, so it's an under over after an extended move, but it's not a 2-bar because you got more volume. This thing can bounce now, you know, given the bounce setup, and last night we were talking about it might do a bounce just because it was so extended and we were starting to see volume escalation. Actually, I don't know if I said that last night. This one is kind of close. I don't know if that's a good, maybe it was on the weekly. We'll look at the weekly next. But here's the retest regen if it wants to bounce that high. Let's see what the weekly looked like. Oh, no, it looked like it was going to try to get into these lows and probably fail. Well, they jumped on it before it got there. So that's a reversal. On the weekly, it's going to have more volume. Stocks, this one also beaten down. This one pressed all the way, below the lows twice now, confirmed both, or suspect once, confirmed the next. This one gets some juice back the other way today, pops back up, going to do a retest regen off this low one more time. Now, it's within 6 bars, it looks like. Let me see, yeah, it's easily within 6 bars. So this is, you know, has a decent probability at least getting back to the high of that bar, which is 90.46. Energy, talk about beaten down. These things had dropped about 10% now in the last 3 months, pretty much straight away. Well, today you get a huge spike back the other way. You come off with volume. This is going to come back in and try to test into these 2 bars here. Looks like that will be the real test. That low is about 72.43, so not all that much farther to the upside. Financials, if you remember, had been one of the stronger ones. Well, they went back up today, but not much juice, and they sold them down a little bit at the end. So this one is kind of interesting in that what you're seeing is that everything that was a buy today was everything that was beaten up. The more beaten up, the better, right? That's how it would look today. Beat it up, buy it. Same thing here in the XLI. Looks just like the XLE. They just jumped all over it, and they got into it and got into it hard, and that's doing a retest regen as well. Technology, just bouncing, nothing much there to talk about. Durables have been very strong now, and the durables got a nice push back up towards the top. Looks like they're going to try to test the top and maybe try to get over it. Healthcare helped by the IBB back into the gap, and it's over the breakdown bar, so that's actually a good thing. Let me see what that one looks like on a weekly. Yeah, just hanging at the top. Did a retest regen and held. So that sector continues to find buyers. And finally, the XLY had come back in to do a retest regen, doesn't have the volume. That also looks like it's going to hang there. So sectors can bounce a little bit more. So that makes me think that probably tomorrow you're going to see some more carry through, at least in the morning, unless we get a big surprise out of China tonight. And let's go over to the Asian chart and see China. So China last night pushed into that area that we talked about as a key level, and what we're talking about is this high volume low right here. So it pushes into it, gets underneath it, eventually closes over it. I wrote a piece this morning, you know, in the macro views section. If you watch TA today, if you come over here and look at this underlying market principles, you know, one of the main principles in markets is that you have an unfettered market, and you really don't have that in China right now. You've got a lot of issues going, you know, to where they close them, they take them off and shut down trading in them when you start getting these days down. Last night there was something like 12 or 1,300 of them that were locked out, I think was the number. When you have government intervention and price discovery no longer takes place in an unfettered market, it's very hard to trust the signals that you're seeing, because you don't know if they're real or not. You know, price discovery is all about perception and reality and pricing that into the market. In other words, if I believe things are worth as much as they show, and potentially they're going to be worth more, I'm going to be willing to pay up. If I don't think that, then I'm not going to be willing to pay up, and I may be willing to sell lower and lower. That's how price gets discovered. That's how markets get priced. That's why markets work as a somewhat efficient mechanism. Is it efficient in that every day it's the right price? No, because perception is a part of this, and that perception can be totally wrong for a while. But when you have a market that can't find, you know, the real price, so to speak, right, that's a real problem, right? Because then nobody knows how to arbitrage it, nobody knows what the real price is, and they don't know how to price in their risk, and pretty soon you have a situation where you don't know what's moving the market, what the value really is, and whether or not you should or shouldn't be in it. And I'm afraid this market is moving more and more towards that. So we'll see tonight. Going to be a big test tonight. Can they hold this and reverse it? They've come back down. They held it last night. Volume's not heavy yet, but again, like I said before, volume escalates on breaks, not on tests usually. German market, if we look over at Germany and look at France, there we really didn't get any information because we simply had inside days. So we had a push down, right? An inside day off this push down. Doesn't really release any information when it does that, because honestly it can go either way. France looks exactly the same. So again, the story is going to be Asia, not Europe. Hong Kong, a little bit of a prelude here, a preview of maybe what's going to happen. Pushed up, got above it. That was going to be a bullish engulfing, yet they gave it up. And so the good signal goes away. This thing's still testing into this high volume low. If it stays down here or pushes a little bit lower, it's going to try to go after the bottom. And if it does that, I suspect Shanghai is going to be the one that causes it to lead that way.
Learn how to trade with the Trade with LA service provided to you by TA Today. This service includes daily portfolio and comments that are emailed to you before the market opens each morning. We provide a daily view of the markets and a model portfolio you can follow even if you work another job. Every weekend, LA records his weekend broadcasts that gives you a synopsis of the week and a prognosis of coming weeks. You will also have access to our Teach and Trade room, where LA provides day trades and teaches neoclassical concepts throughout the trading day. To get started, go to our homepage and click Trade with LA.
So to wrap this up, I'm going to come back to the S&P 500. The break is going to occur, if we get a break, upside or downside, it's going to occur after we get some sort of a move and a failed bounce. It looked as if we were going to get that back in early July, if you remember. We had that big move down, and then we really tanked right at the end of, here we tanked in June, we got a little bounce, and then we started tanking in the first week of July. But somehow, one more time, right, straight up move. Now you're coming down again. Now you've got your bounce, right? Maybe it's going to extend a little bit more. The break is going to occur when this setup does not get a full bounce. In other words, when you make a full move like this, you're not going to break it. If this had come straight down, it's almost a guaranteed buy down there, because it's going to be very hard to break it unless you've got some sort of traumatic news somewhere, right? Some dramatic news. So in this case, you get the bounce. If it comes back down, breaks this, you get the ABCD structure downside, and volume starts to escalate in this area as it breaks the low, then something's going on. Remember here, you have a high volume low. It certainly is going to get tested at some point. It's just a question of when. At this point, the question is not so much that. The question is, what does the bounce do? Does it fail back in this area or not? And off this big breakdown bar. That's the key, right in here. If you get a failure there, you can get the ABCD structure down, and you have a decent chance of trying to break this thing finally. We'll see. Until next time, have a great one. Thanks for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Good night.